With WesternUnion.com's 4-star rated mobile app, send money fast virtually anywhere for just about anything. Download the free Western Union mobile app today from iTunes or the Play Store, or visit WesternUnion.com to learn more.
Can you feel it?
Durant for three, bingo! Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Good! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown Podcast with Bruce Bowen. Along with three-time NBA champion Bruce Bowen, here's ESPN.com NBA columnist Israel Gutierrez.
Welcome back into another edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast with Bruce Bowen. I'm Israel Gutierrez. We had a couple of game ones in the second round on Tuesday night. We'll start off with the Spurs and the Trailblazers.
Taken off the glass by Leonard, swings ahead to Parker, into the lane, spins, drives, lays it up and in and drew the foul. Tony Parker, you've seen him do it a million times before. It's amazing every time. He's as quick as there is down the league, 94 feet. That time he put the burners on JB, spun like a top and laid it in.
That was one of my favorite play-by-play guys. Kevin Calabro on ESPN Radio calling the Spurs 116-92 blowout of Portland in Game 1. Bruce, you heard there that Tony Parker little spinning layup that he hit, but I would argue that the best thing he did and the best thing the Spurs did in that first game against Portland was defend. I mean, we saw this Portland Trailblazers team have a field day, multiple field days against Houston Rockets in the first round, and they kind of looked at the Spurs team and were almost like, whoa, okay, this is what defense is like. And they ended up shooting 37.8%. LaMarcus Aldridge had himself a good game. He had 32 and 14, but nobody else did. I mean, Nicholas Batum, 3 of 12, Damian Lillard, 6 of 15, Wes Matthews, 8 points, 2 of 6 shooting. It was like Aldridge was by himself, and even that wouldn't have mattered because it was kind of a blowout from the very start. What were you most impressed by the San Antonio Spurs performance?
Well, I like their mindset going into this game, Izzy, as compared to Game 1 against Dallas. I think they really learned a lesson there in that series as far as allowing a team to stay close or allowing a team to do virtually what they want to do as far as their style of play can lead to long series. And so they kind of just rode the momentum of their last game against Dallas as far as paying attention to detail, first and foremost, and get back in defense. They realize how good LaMarcus Aldridge is, as well as Damian Lillard. You saw on the pick and rolls last night, they were just so active. They got their hands on a lot of balls, and when you're doing that, when you're engaged, it only leads to big games as far as Tony Parker is concerned. You know, he's going to continue to attack. We know that that's what he does. That's what's required for them to be successful. But yesterday I thought it was more about the respect of their opponent and having that healthy fear I talked about before going into this game.
Well, we know what Popovich, coach of the year, best coach in the league right now, one of the best coaches of all time. We've seen it when it's obvious what the coaching strategy is, or at least what the defensive strategy is, like last year in the finals. Play off of Dwayne Wade, play off of LeBron James, make them shoot jumpers. For the most part, that worked pretty well. What is the strategy here with Portland? Because this is a team that's balanced. They tend to move the ball. They don't get a bunch of bench production outside of Mo Williams, but you still don't know where the offense is coming from. It could come from any one of 6 sources, essentially, any given night. And yet, 9 assists, Bruce, in this game. 4 made three-pointers on 16 attempts. This just didn't have the feel of a Portland team that played like itself. What did the Spurs do? I mean, was it Tony Parker really helping shut down Damian Lillard? Was it a specific strategy that they employed to not allow the three-point looks? What do they normally do in this situation? Or what did they do in this series to start this series against Portland, because it was impressive?
Well, it is taking away the strengths, and part of it is getting a hand up on each and every shot. I don't think you saw a lot of wide-open shots for Portland last night. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of contested shots. There were a lot of shots that weren't exactly where Portland wanted to shoot from, distance-wise. You didn't have that same vibe, that same feel of what you saw from Portland against Houston in Game 1. It's funny, but when you are aware of how good a team is and can be, Izzy, that's where it's so important for you to really set the tone. Send a message that this is the way that we plan on playing this game, and it's through the physicality of the game. When they drove the basketball, it wasn't just that they had to worry about a help defender. They had to worry about the guy that they were trying to get around as well. So they made the sets for Portland very difficult to get into. There was a lot of confusion, I thought, from Portland's standpoint, where they weren't getting to their spots as far as on offense where they normally are. You had sometimes it was Nicholas Batum initiating offense because there was a denial of Damian Lillard. And in those situations, guys think, we can just get into it. But there's a reason why you have Damian Lillard getting you into offense a lot of times as compared to others, because it just works better, and you have more opportunities with Damian Lillard running the pick and roll and looking for guys or taking his shot as compared to Nicholas Batum.
Yeah, it's a great point that a lot of people don't pay enough attention to sometimes. Where the play starts is where you need to be disruptive. Not necessarily, hey, this is the pass they want to make to get the scoring play, or these are the options that they have. If you interrupt the beginning of the play, then none of those options happen, and sometimes it's easier to do than others. Like, for example, against Miami, you can't really pressure. You can't really say, hey, take the ball out of Chalmers' hands, take the ball out of LeBron's hands, take the ball out of Dwayne Wade's hands, because any one of those guys can initiate the offense and do it well, as opposed to, some teams that are more point guard centered. And, yeah, on this team, you like what Wesley Matthews does, but mostly you want him in the post, or you want him against a smaller defender, or you want him catching and shooting, coming off of some screens, maybe a curl here or there. And same with Batum. He's not quite Scottie Pippen on the offensive end. He's not a point forward. So
right.
He's probably not going to initiate the offense. So if you can take Lillard out of it, then yeah, that's, or at least to start the play, then that's going to make you more successful on almost every possession. And that responsibility, yeah, it's a team effort, but it largely goes to Tony Parker. And here was Greg Popovich talking about his point guard and what he does as a leader for this team.
Well, he's been doing that for a lot of years. It's nothing different. He's the guy that is our attack guy and creates for everybody and starts the offense going. But he's also, played very good defense this year, and most people don't really see that.
Yeah, and most people don't. I mean, heck, even in these last two games, the guy's averaging 32.5 points and shooting 56% in Game 7 against Dallas and Game 1 against Portland. So you're going to pay attention to the offense. But, Bruce, defensively, what makes Tony Parker effective in general, like Pop said this year, and, how'd that translate into Game 1?
Well, Tony has a lot of fight in him. It's funny because I remember at practice there'd be times where if we were doing drill work where it's 2-on-2 or 1-on-1 out of the block, I post him up, and it was funny to me because, I gave him the business, Izzy, but that he would fight me, and that right. He doesn't succumb to the whole height differential. He's going to battle, and I think because of his conditioning, it's one of the best in the league, Izzy, as far as if you even look on offense. Tony comes off a pick and roll, and then he comes off another one. And if that one doesn't work, he's coming off of another one. And he's still getting ahead of steam, and I think you have to credit that to his conditioning and his drive. I mean, he spends a lot of time on taking care of his body now, especially that he's getting older. Tony's always been an individual to eat healthy, and he just ate a lot. I mean, you've never seen somebody put away more food than him. But you take into account that he is aware of what he's putting in his body because of the responsibilities he has now. And with these other point guards that are good and they're coming at him, he has something to protect. He's a 3-time champion. He's a multiple all-star. So he knows that he has to be just as good on defense as he is on offense because it's a lot harder to hide the deficiencies of your game when you're on defense as compared to offense. Offense, he can have an off night shooting, but he can still get to the lane and score 10 layups, and next thing you know, he shot 10 for 18, whereas he didn't hit a jump shot. So on defense, though, you're exposed a lot more. And then you got to credit the coaching staff with the game plan. They stick to it. even if someone's scoring, it is what they do. They're not going to change on a whim in San Antonio because Pop doesn't believe in that. If they are going to change, it's going to be where they can get a chance to practice what's going on instead of just throwing something out there.
Well, I don't know if you know this about me, Bruce, but I like to dabble in the culinary arts. Like, I like to, mess around in the kitchen a little bit. And so I know a little bit about French food, and the fact that Tony can eat healthy, despite possibly, I don't know exactly how he grew up, but if he was growing up around that rich, butter-filled French food, the fact that he can eat healthy now is pretty darn impressive. Boris Diaw might want to take a couple tips there, Bruce. Let me ask you this. What does Portland do then? I mean, how do they respond? Because they either have to find options outside of Damian Lillard to start the offense, which would probably be difficult to adjust to, or they just have to be more forceful. How do they fix this? Because right now, I know you don't want to overreact to one game, but right now it looks as if Spurs are going in one direction, and the Blazers, while they still can possibly put together a good game, doesn't feel like a team that can offer much resistance in terms of even winning a couple of games in this series.
Well, first and foremost, it's important for them to throw that game away. They didn't play well. The Spurs enforced their will, and now the playoffs are funny this way. They can have a game like that, Izzy, and come back strong the next game with a whole different mindset, because now they are aware that, San Antonio is good. And so because they are good, we need to do a better job of getting into our sets. And then accountability. There were so many missed shots from others that, it didn't look like the team that we've seen against the Houston Rockets. So now I think you're going to have more guys that are really concentrating on the fact that let me make sure I do my part. And my part would involve making sure I knock down my shots or taking shots that I'm comfortable with. Not being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but being more diligent in getting into certain sets and utilizing my screens, set my guy up so I can come off and don't try to rush it and do it on my own. It's going to take ball movement in order for this ball club to really have a chance in San Antonio. And yesterday, you didn't see the ball swinging quite a bit. There'd be times they come down and just dump it into LaMarcus and say, okay, do your thing. You cannot win that way, especially in the playoffs against a good defensive team like San Antonio. You have to get ball movement, move the defense so that you're able to catch defense at driving spots where you can penetrate, draw the defense, now kick the ball. But if you're trying to do it just one pass, one shot, or just run a pick and roll and that's that, it's not going to work. You have to get back to the basics of what you do.
Yeah, you forget, people forget, but Tim Duncan, man, he might be a little older, might be a little slower, might be a little less athletic, but his body is the same, and good luck scoring on that guy. He could defend into his late 40s, and he could probably give a guy a difficult time. So, now I know, like you said, LaMarcus, had a decent game. He had 32 points, didn't shoot 50%. But, if it comes down to dumping it down to LaMarcus versus Tim Duncan, I don't like those odds for Portland. They also got away, the Spurs did, with an 0 for 6 performance from Manu Ginobili. That's not going to happen again in all likelihood. So, the Spurs look like they're in a great spot. But let's close this out with this 2 words. And I'm just going to say the 2 words, and you're going to go from there. You ready, Bruce?
I'm ready.
Aaron Baines.
Kiwi. New Zealand. Big body will bang.
That's all we need to know. Mr. Baines, Mr. Big Body Will Bang, got 15 minutes, gave you 10 and 7. That felt like he's been waiting for that opportunity for a while. But like you said, if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you throw this game away, so let's do the same and move on to Heat Nets.
Paul is like almost, like a family member now at this point. It's like you go to a family reunion and you don't ever see that cousin until the family reunion. That's what Paul is to me. I mean, I got 9 straight postseasons and I've seen Paul 5 of them. First it was me changing the uniform, and now it was him changing the uniform when we still see each other. So, like I said before in the past, and I will continue to say, he's one of the best guys I love to compete against.
That was LeBron James after the Heat's 107-86 demolition of the Brooklyn Nets in game number 1. That was an interesting note because I asked him, and I don't normally pat myself on the back for asking a question, but I asked him about I noted that right before the game he kind of said something to Paul Pierce, and the two of them giggled. Well, giggled's probably a bad word. Two of them smiled, gave a little bit of a laugh right before the tip, and I'm wondering what in the world those two are joking about before game one after they've met each other so many times in the playoffs, and that was your answer. It was, yeah. This is right. This feels right. It has to be me versus you to get anywhere in the playoffs. And as much as I called it a demolition, in the first half it was close. The third quarter is when Miami started to pull away. I thought it was pretty obvious from the beginning that Miami was intent on moving the ball, not letting the Nets kind of catch them in quicksand, and they're switching defense, which forces you to just rely on that mismatch, which isn't really a mismatch. A lot of times, especially with the wings that they have, the length that they have, Sean Livingston really helping that team starting five. Was it to you as simple as Miami making an adjustment to how they play against Brooklyn, and now Brooklyn probably won't have a response or is incapable of responding, or is this a situation where Miami kind of took the first hit and said, all right, Brooklyn, now it's your turn? Do they have an answer, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, we shall soon see. I think they do have an answer as far as regrouping. Now you have to change the mindset. You're not playing Toronto. You're playing a team that was waiting for you, number one, and they want to come out with a great effort. See, this is the flip side of when you beat a team, 4 times during the course of a season. You get to the postseason, they remember that. They remember almost every single big play in those games, and they execute. They realize that a lot of that had more to do with the lack of execution than anything else, or you have more of a scenario where now you have to go back to the drawing board as far as Brooklyn is concerned. All right, now you always have a plan B. Okay, we're going to try to go with plan A, which has been successful for us throughout the regular season. But if that doesn't work, we're going to go to plan B. And plan B, I think, is going to involve more Darren Williams and Paul Pierce being able to attack even more so and create shots as well as Joe Johnson. But you're going to get them in a variety of ways. I think you'll see more post-ups from Joe. You'll see more ball movement and where they can attack Miami, as we saw yesterday in the first half. They moved the ball pretty well, but it was just a matter of, I think, the freshness of Miami and the execution was huge. The ball was flying for Miami Heat, and you got to get back to the defensive aspect of things. And if you can't do that, then that spells trouble for Brooklyn, because Miami did a really good job of ball movement. You saw Ray hitting shots, Shane Battier hitting shots. When you get production from those guys, and I think they'll make more of a concentrated effort to really get to Shane Battier, because out of all the guys, they feel like they can get to his shot a lot quicker than others. But you got to do your work early. You got to get involved into the transition where it can allow that defender to actually get to the other guy in rotations.
Yeah, that's to me what it feels like the Nets are going to be able to do is just play harder. I mean, just give more of an effort, more of a fight, kind of be the bullies if you have to be the bad guys. Who cares? I mean, nobody's picking you to win this series anyway, so you might as well just become disliked. And, I thought there was a little bit too much, friendly respect, I guess. I don't really know how to say it exactly or how to describe it. But, even that first moment where you had Paul and LeBron kind of joking right before tip-off, that's not how these two usually go at it, meaning those two or Kevin Garnett. And then you had Kevin Garnett scoreless for the first time in his playoff career. Paul only finished with 8 points. And when you're really asserting yourself, look, you find a way to put a couple of buckets up. You find a way to have a good game against your rival, if you're Paul Pierce, your rival LeBron James. And Kevin Garnett talked about it after the game. He said, flat out, we just need to be more aggressive. The Heat were ready for us. Now we have to be ready for them.
More confidence, more being aggressive, putting them on their heels. And I think Sean's the only starter that went to the free throw line. Can't have that. But, they've been waiting on us. They've been rested. They've been hearing that we beat them this and all that. So, it's a new season. So we just got to be better, and we will be.
Yeah, and early on in that game, the Heat thought all the whistles were going against them, and you would think maybe the Nets can pile up, some free throw attempts and be, effective that way, or at least try to be efficient that way. And like Garnett mentioned, Sean Livingston, 1 for 2, the only starter to go to the free throw line. No free throws for Paul Pierce, Garnett, Darren Williams, or Joe Johnson. That's nuts. That's nuts to think about. Joe Johnson, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Darren Williams, not a single free throw among them. Garnett, sure, only played 16 minutes, but everybody else played at least 29. So I'm not sure what the Nets can do schematically, but they have to make life miserable for Miami. At least try to go chest to chest with them, push them around, bully them around, because that's their best shot. Frustrating them and keeping the score low and keeping their offense away from that smooth ball movement offense that they had.
Well, Izzy, you talked about it even with Sean Livingston going only one going to the line. That's not somebody that you necessarily think like, oh, we're going to go through him on offense. The others got to get involved, and this is what happens. You're going to see a focused group. Really, I think they're going to drive to a fault next game, because that's what's required in these moments now. In the playoffs, if you don't do something a certain way in the first time, you got another opportunity. But you don't want to keep losing opportunities of being what you guys have been throughout the season. So they have been a team that's been able to get to the free throw line. Paul, Darren, and Joe Johnson especially with the ball in Joe's hands so much. When you settle for jump shots, you're not bringing the fight to the game. What you're doing is just settling, and they need to be able to, bring the fight if they're going to have any chance to win as they have in the past.
In the paint, Miami scored 52 points, shot 65%, and had a differential of 24, plus 24 in that area. That's something that Brooklyn prides itself on stopping, especially when it's not a big team, and Miami is not a big team. So there's one element that they need to fix. My issue is on the defensive end, I don't know how much they can change if Miami's going to be dedicated to moving the ball. You mentioned maybe leaving a little bit extra space for Shane Battier because you can recover to him quicker. I mean, look, Spo's got options in that case. You take out Battier, you put in Ray Allen, or you change the dynamic a little bit and spot up somebody else, a Chris Bosh in the corner. So I think that's going to be difficult. But I do think offensively they can definitely make some adjustments to put some pressure on Miami. I mean, first of all, in that game, they kind of had butterfingers. I mean, you saw a handful. I remember 3 of them passes that kind of just went right through the offensive player's hands, or, maybe the pass was slightly off and it was still catchable, and they totally missed it. So you want to execute or be a little sharper in that respect. But also, you mentioned Sean Livingston not being known as a guy who gets to the line much. I think they need to explore Sean as a primary offensive option in this series, because one of the things that was quite noticeable in that game, especially in person, I thought, was his length and his ability to get shots over. It doesn't even have to be Mario Chalmers. It could be any of the point guards, obviously, Chalmers or Norris Cole. He could easily get past or shoot over Ray Allen. He could even shoot over Dwayne Wade. That's how long this guy's arms are. He's 6'7" with long arms. And Dwayne Wade, not at full explosiveness, might not be able to reach some of his shots. So if you post up Sean, you saw them do it in the Toronto series at times against Lowry or against Grievous Vasquez. Do that a little bit more. Kind of let Sean Livingston be a focal point of the offense, and then get your rotations going if they double. Get Darren a couple of good looks. Get Paul Pierce some good looks. Get Joe Johnson some good looks. Because if you're just going to post up Joe Johnson because he was such a good option in that Toronto series, Miami's going to have better counters to that, or better ways to fight that off, at least better than Toronto did. So I do think the Nets have some options on offense. But, again, if the Heat offensively is dedicated to moving that ball, I don't know if there's much Brooklyn can do about that. We're going to take a quick break right here after these couple of blowouts on Tuesday night. What can we expect on Wednesday? We'll get into those games in just a minute.
ESPN Radio.
With the action on the court, the diamond, or the gridiron.
Comes alive.
The NBA.
The Miami Heat have won the 2013 NBA title.
Major League Baseball.
The Boston Red Sox have won the World
The
Series.
full championship series.
The tide has risen again, the 3rd time in 4 years.
You're home for the best in sports play-by-play.
ESPN Radio.
They were hitting jump shots. That's what we wanted. Blake Griffin started the game off hitting 2 or 3 jump shots. And Chris Paul hit 4 or 5 threes in a row. And then J.J. Redick. And then Matt Barnes. So we kept them out of our paint. We got to correct it. We got to make them miss next game and be a little more physical.
That was MVP Kevin Durant after the Los Angeles Clippers decisively took that game 1 in the series to take a 1-0 lead and take home court advantage in the series. Bruce, I'm going to give you some numbers here on why that game 1 might have been an anomaly and not necessarily an indicator of what's to come in this series. For starters, both Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook shot over 45%. The Thunder have a career, that includes the postseason, 780 win percentage. That's 110-31 is their record, when both of those guys shoot at least 45% from the floor. So they took an L in this one, which was, a 22% chance that could happen. So I'd go ahead and take my chances if those two guys shoot 45% or better in another game. Another one, and this one might be a little tricky because, if the starters aren't necessarily giving you a whole bunch, then you're going to need more from your bench to even stay close. But the Thunder bench scored 31 points. That's their second highest total of the playoffs so far. And the Thunder had a winning percentage above 700 again this season when they got at least 30 bench points. And then there's, the Thunder out-rebounded the Clippers by 16 in the game, which, say what you will, the Clippers probably didn't even worry too much about rebounding because they knew they were going to score every time down. But this season, including the playoffs, teams that got out-rebounded by at least 15 lost 83% of the time. The Heat's one of those teams that doesn't necessarily rely on the pure rebounding numbers and don't worry about that. And the Clippers are probably another one of those teams because their offense is so good. But you look at those signs and you start to say, okay, let's not overreact to that game 1 win by the Clippers. Is it as simple as doing the same things and hoping that they work out better, Bruce, or do the Thunder need to change something up in order to be the defensive team that we know they are while still getting the production from Westbrook and Durant?
Oh, absolutely. You change things up. You saw what coming in as they did before did to them. Now, do we expect Chris Paul to shoot lights out quite like that from 3? Who knows? If he gets hot, he can do it again. He's that good of a player.
Yeah,
we get that. But they have to do something that makes the Clippers look like they're working for their baskets. It was just too many shots that they were getting in that game where it was no contest at all. I think about in the second half, and this is what bothered me, I think late in the third quarter, Blake Griffin against Adams, he comes off a little pin down and he just curls and he has a thunderous dunk. And for you to allow Blake Griffin to have a dunk like that, that when he gets to high flying, those are the things he loves to do. I just felt like OKC was waiting for the Clippers to finally miss as compared to having something to do with the Clippers missing shots.
Yeah, it wasn't too long ago where I watched this Oklahoma City Thunder team play in Miami, and I said to myself, man, that defense is really good in large part because they're so long and they deflect passes. They can really clog the paint and recover as quickly as any team out there because of their length and athleticism. And because of Scotty Brooks, to his credit, stubbornly playing Kendrick Perkins as much as he can get away with it. But they don't look like that team. They haven't looked like that team in the playoffs yet when it comes to defense. And I'm starting to wonder why. Now, obviously, the quality of competition gets better, but it shouldn't be this easy. You shouldn't be able to score 55% against this team, especially, when your power forwards are Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. Yeah, that's a great duo. But you got a great counter, at least he should, defensively, in Kendrick Perkins and Serge Ibaka. So I'm a little surprised by that. But the one part where I feel like Oklahoma City has to take pride in is Russell Westbrook's ability to be a shutdown defender. He needs to look at Chris Paul and say, you know what, people might consider us the 2 best point guards in the league, or at least 2 of the top 3, 2 of the top 4, and you just outplayed me by a healthy margin, going for 32 points, 10 assists, and hitting 8 3-pointers. Russell Westbrook, as much as we talk about, or people talk about Kevin Durant building off this MVP award ceremony, building off that emotional speech that he gave, and building off what I'm sure will be an emotional moment in that pregame ceremony where he gets that trophy, Russell Westbrook needs to be the guy that steps up and says, you know what, 6 turnovers, too much. I need to score. Not only do I need to score and set up Kevin Durant, I need to stop Chris Paul as much as I can. Way easier said than done, but there needs to be a pride factor there coming from Russell, is there not?
No, there is something that needs to, because it's about accountability. You're one of the leaders here. And when you are a leader, I think it's important for the team, or I should say the coaches, to come up with a better game plan. Because it's not just Chris Paul coming down and breaking Russell down and getting shots. This comes through pick and roll. But I can't even say, like, even with the 3-point shots, Izzy, it wasn't a matter of, oh, he broke him down and shot the 3. It was so much space that was given to him. They got to become more engaged. They got to become more vested in the process and really take on the persona of Kendrick Perkins with the wing players. You know, Kendrick likes that physicality. They need to allow Clippers to feel them. You know, they got to feel somebody when they come off a screen. You got a hard head. But see, this is what happens, though, Izzy. Because Chris Paul is so crafty with the ball, if you hard hedge him, he will string the pick and roll out and get the ball in the right player's hands and make a great decision. So it's not just like you're talking about taking a certain player that's a 2-guard or a 3-guard or a 3-man or even a post player out of the game. We're talking about a point guard who runs the show the best. I mean, one of the best in the game right now, whether it's him scoring or setting up others, because that's what you run the risk. You can say we're going to take the ball out of his hands, but it plays right into the hands of the Clippers, I think, because if you string that or if you trap Chris Paul off a pick and roll, now you got to deal with him hitting Blake Griffin on the roll. Is your other opponent going to rotate? So once he rotates to Blake, then Blake throws the ball near the square, and nobody can get up where DeAndre Jordan can. So the Thunder have their hands full, and it's not just as simple as taking the ball out of Chris Paul's hands or making sure you do something with him.
No, I'm with you. I get it's not just a bunch of one-on-one with him and Russell, but you said the words make them feel you. Well, it's as simple as that to me. It's if he's coming off a screen, make sure he's thinking twice about where he's going with it. Make sure you borderline foul him every single time to make sure there's somebody right there, because it seemed like it was too, A, B, C, D, bam, 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 bam. It's basically a game of checkers. They're just kind of hopping people and going through their progressions, and everything that they wanted was there. Including if Chris Paul wanted it maybe on a switch or whatever the case may be, a step back and a quick 3. So it's like he had zero resistance, even though it wasn't necessarily a one-on-one matchup there. And look, I've seen it happen. You can blitz him hard and make the offense get thrown off. Now they've gotten better at it. Blake Griffin's become such a great passer that he can sort of even handle that little 4-on-3 if you blitz Chris Paul and take the ball out of his hands. But you've got to do something. And this is where, and it's the last topic on this game, this is where the Scott Brooks situation really comes to mind. We talked about it earlier in the year where Kevin Durant almost called him out by saying, hey, when we blitz too hard at the top, the teams have kind of figured out what we're doing. Well, within the game, whether it be defense or offensively, and most often it's offensively where they get frustrated, there aren't many adjustments coming from Scotty Brooks or coming from that Oklahoma City team. There was this one, and I mentioned this on Around the Horn yesterday, Bruce. There was this one part of the game where it was a timeout, and Russell's kind of like hovering around the huddle in the bench, kind of poked his head in, said, there's really nothing there for me to learn, and he walked to the side and was like 3 seats away. It's almost as if they really don't know what they're going to get from Scott Brooks, or maybe they don't expect much of an ability for him to adjust. Do you see that ability in this team right now, or do you see a team that's kind of just flustered and kind of stuck and not really having answers outside of, hey, Kevin, hey, Russ, do better?
Right. No, I can't say that. I'm not willing to go to that extreme, Izzy, because he made some adjustments against the Memphis Grizzlies that helped them out. They got a little more athletic. They got a little bit more tougher when they brought in Caron Butler to start instead of Cephalosha. And also utilizing more of Reggie Jackson during that time, coming up with some type of scheme where they could do that. But now this is where you get to see the opportunities of how coaches adjust. We forget that early on in the season, they're a very good defensive team. The Thunder are. And so because they are a good defensive team, this is where you just get back to your roots. You know, you're playing against a quality team, and if you want to have any chance in this series, you're going to have to make the adjustment of matching, you know, their energy, number one, because some of the stuff is more about competition. You know, keeping your cool is key too. I mean, people made a big deal about what Russell Westbrook did. You know, you want your star in the huddle, but in the NBA, if you're not in the game, a lot of times guys aren't paying attention. So as we go forward from there, though, it'll be key. I think it'll be key how they utilize Ibaka, because I think Ibaka can do a better job than what he did before, but you must occupy DeAndre Jordan.
Yeah, that's a good point. Serge has to find a way to be an impact player, and sometimes people don't see the type of impact he has just by looking at the box score, just by watching the ball during the games. But he needs to find a way to be that third option, kind of make people forget about James Harden for at least a minute, because Reggie Jackson, at least so far in this series, isn't doing it. He was 1 for 8 for 4 points in this game in 30 minutes. But that's enough about that Oklahoma City Thunder loss. Let's move on to a Roman tragedy, the Indiana Pacers.
Try to be a little bit more aggressive on both ends, and just not be content with letting our guards and forwards get all the defensive rebounds.
That was Roy Hibbert of the Indiana Pacers, or at least the voice of Roy Hibbert. Nobody's quite sure exactly where Roy Hibbert has been for a while now. He went scoring. I felt bad for him in that game one, Bruce. No points, no rebounds, and getting mocked left and right from guys you would think would know better or would know what that feels like. And Tracy McGrady and Gilbert Arenas just posted nastiness on Twitter or Instagram or wherever they were posting it from. Bruce, here was my take on the Pacers, at least the latest take. We've all had about 1 million of them since this tailspin happened. Was that they just looked not old. They just looked slower, Bruce. They just looked a little bit slower than they did when they were playing especially well in the regular season. And when you've got a team that's already bigger and more of a plotting team, when you consider Roy Hibbert, David West, those guys, and you don't have that explosive point guard, your most explosive player is Paul George. When you have that and you slow it down even a little bit, it's going to look painfully slow. Their offensive sets are going to look predictable. Teams are going to be able to see it coming, see plays coming, and then adjust to them quickly and not let Indiana score. And when your most dynamic guy, or at least the guy that looks quickest on the floor, is Lance Stevenson, that's great sometimes. But then the other half the time, he's going to get by one guy and then try to cross somebody over in the middle of the lane as if he was out there all by himself, and then his pocket gets picked from behind. You're going to have plays like that. So I don't know did you see anything like that? Did you see this team looking a little bit slower, or was it just a matter of, that perplexing, wow, this team has just kind of forgotten how to play basketball together?
Well, I'm going to tell you what you saw, Izzy. You saw Washington having a lot to do with them looking slow.
Yeah, of course.
You saw that had more to do with it than anything else. It's funny how you might be able to get away with certain things during the course of a regular season. They get exposed in the playoffs. And then they get a little bit more exposed as you move on to the next round. Now, I found it funny, you talking about former players or players tweeting things. I thought that was so disrespectful, especially from Tracy McGrady. Shoot, if he hadn't been with the Spurs, he wouldn't have made it past the first round, Izzy. And you didn't know he was with the Spurs, only that he was sitting on the sideline during the course of the game. So
he's doing so many interviews, it was ridiculous. That's how you knew he was on the Spurs. He was doing interviews left and right.
So, but you gotta get to the meat of things, and even though there's things going on with that group, as far as Roy Hibbert is concerned, I understand how it feels when you just can't do anything right. During the year where we use that composite ball, Izzy, that funny ball, we went away from the leather. We were going with pleather or whatever you want to call it. All I know is it got real fuzzy after so many usage. So when we came back to the leather ball, I think I was like, it took me 13, 14, or 15 threes before I made one. And you practice, you do it, and you just keep saying, hey, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. But you got to participate in it. And what I mean for Roy, when it comes to rebounding, you're over 7 feet. You got to run, even if it means you knocking somebody over, you're just going for the ball. And, you know, he's so mental right now. I'm looking at him during interviews. Is he not even looking at Josina Anderson during his response and during, you know, his answers? It's like, come on, Roy, don't give in to all the things that are going on. But that's me. That I can only speak from my experience of having struggles where you just trust the process. You trust it, and next thing you know, I go 4 for 6 from 3. But I just didn't sit back and moan and say, well, you know, I just got to get more shots, you know. No, I had to participate in it as well, and that meant I got to see the ball go through the basket. That's where I talk about he got to knock somebody over and get a rebound and get a putback, you know. And so once, you know, I got more engaged on those things, then the game just starts to come to me, and it happens. And it doesn't help that now he has his teammates questioning him and things of that nature. He just got to get back to the basics as far as getting after it, Izzy.
Yeah, you have to participate in your own recovery, of course. But when you look at Roy Hibbert and his history, what does it tell you? Does it tell you he's good in spurts, or does it tell you he's good consistently? And if you look at it, he's good in spurts. He's good against certain opponents. I mean, even last year before the playoffs, if it wasn't for the playoffs, we would have looked at Roy Hibbert's year and said, wow, that's a pretty disappointing year for a guy who's 7'2". But then in the playoffs, he came back and he shot a high percentage. He scored a lot. He rebounded a lot, in large part because of the way the Knicks and the Heat defended, which allowed him to hit the offensive boards. It allowed him for some pin downs against some smaller people and everything else. But we have just as much evidence on Roy to suggest that he can be taken out of games. He can be taken out of a series. So I'm not ready to say it's as simple as, hey, you know, get your mind in it and you'll be okay. It's the same reason I'm not willing to say I'm going to give the Washington Wizards all this credit for you know, really taking out the Pacers, because we just saw them go 7 against the Atlanta Hawks, the Pacers. Yeah. So it could be that they just struggled mightily.
You said something that was key there. Last year, you know, it was what was going on, you know, and he was able to have an effect. But as he did that, he became more aggressive. He became more active when he got he still get a couple of looks down low. It's just that he's not even giving what he gave last year. And I know I'm going long with this, but whenever you start to feel like you deserve stuff, that's usually when things go awry. You know, I think there came a time now where Roy feels like, you know what, I should get this just because. No, Roy, you're still the 4th option in the starting 5. So, you know, or better yet, even the 5th option. It's nothing wrong with being the 5th option, though. You just don't try to change and become something else. Stick to who you are. That's where I think the greatest part of this whole issue is. When he starts talking about calling out teammates, we got some selfish dudes here. It's not about that, Roy. You're the 5th option, man. Realize that and keep it going.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if Roy knows who he is at the moment, and that's part of the problem. So we'll see how this turns out, but there seems to be a little bit of an identity issue with him, or it is just flat out a confidence issue. Speaking of identity issues, the Warriors are going to take on a new one because they just fired their head coach.
Although he'd accomplished quite a bit, we wanted to move in a direction where maybe we were possibly more aligned as an organization entirely. And as far as what we think we can obtain, we think we can obtain the similar results, but in totality have a candidate that we can move forward with in that direction.
That was Warriors general manager Bob Myers discussing the dismissal of Mark Jackson, which was rumored to be an inevitability come the end of this season, assuming the Warriors made a deep run. We all know they ended their first-round series with a loss in Game 7 to the Clippers. And so there was not that deep run that you would expect him he needed to make in all likelihood to stay on board. And you heard Myers say there, essentially, hey, we think he's got a bright future. We think he's a good coach. We want somebody that we are more in line with. And that means somebody that I get along with better, somebody that management, the front office, and the ownership gets along with better. And there are rumors that Mark Jackson was kind of stubborn, kind of my way or the highway type of guy. And, you know, the front office guys were thinking, well, we prefer the highway. It's faster and uses less fuel. So, to me, I think it's perfectly reasonable to understand why people are upset or think that it's unfair for Mark Jackson to get fired. But I also think it's perfectly reasonable to understand, look, this guy wasn't the guy we necessarily vibed with. And while the results were nice, we still feel like we can get better and we can get better quicker. They're doing the smart thing. They're projecting. They're moving forward, and they're saying, look, yeah, he won 51 games. He takes us to 2 straight playoff series. He made Steph Curry an all-star. Great. But you know what? Steph Curry made himself an all-star, and you know, these players, for as much as the coach gets credit, these players deserve a lot of credit, and frankly, these players deserve the best opportunity to be as good as possible as soon as possible, and they don't believe, especially with the infighting or whatever you want to call it, that was the case between him and management, that's going to continue to happen, and that growth is going to continue to happen at Golden State. So I'm fine with them moving on. I absolutely am. Not a knock on Mark Jackson. I think he might be a successor to Frank Vogel if Indiana decides to move on from Frank Vogel. But I have no issues whatsoever with the Warriors moving on from Mark Jackson.
Well, I do, Izzy. I mean, you've gone to the playoffs back-to-back years, and you look at where this team was prior to his arrival, and he's had to do it in the playoffs without 2 key members each year, Izzy. You didn't have David Lee last year because of an injury during the playoffs, and they get past the first round. They lose to the eventual team that represents the West for the finals, and then you lose your top big man as far as defense is concerned, Andrew Bogut, this year. I think it's foul, you know, and all the things that transpired during the season. I mean, you got a coach there recording conversations, leaving his cell phone.
No. I got to stop you right there. I need you to answer this question for me, Bruce. Why in the world is an assistant coach recording conversations if there wasn't some shady stuff going around? Like, people don't just start recording conversations.
I think it's I don't understand that one, Izzy. Even with the whole Scalabrine thing that took place, I'm like, there's nothing but it's funny. This is something that is so true, and I know that you've had to deal with certain situations, Izzy, where you just have no control, but it's so important for you to stay who you are and allow the chips to fall where they may. Even with all that mess going on, they still got to the playoffs, and I mean, Izzy, Game 7 they lose to a team that had all their players. You're doing it without one of your guys, and you want to sit up here and tell the world that, oh, you know, we really love what Mark did. We wish him the best elsewhere. You know, that's that whole line of when a girl breaks up with you and they say, no, it's me, it's not you. And the next week you see it with another guy. You know, so, man, it's, for me, I again, with all that he had accomplished there, Izzy, he brought a certain persona to that group. He brought confidence to that group. He brought it to the point, Izzy, where every single game that they played, especially in the playoffs, we just felt like they're going to put a run together, and next thing you know, they're going to win. And 9 times out of 10, it happened. So to hear this stuff take place, all the turmoil that was surrounding that group this year, it's unfortunate, because now if ownership is behind all this stuff, which they are, and you get another guy next year and he loses, watch all the things as far as the excuses that are made that, we got to give him time. We got to give him time. Well, you say you got to give him time, but you just had a coach there that took you to two playoff seasons back to back, and you fired him. Man, get out of here.
I'm not arguing. I'm not arguing with you one bit. Like, everything you said makes all the sense in the world. But they're also gambling that their way is going to be the right way. That they're gambling that, look, we see what we see with Mark Jackson, what we know him better than anybody else here does. Therefore, we're going to take this gamble and we're going to feel fine about it. I get it. I think, like they said, Mark Jackson's probably going to find another job, and I have no problem with that. But they're just moving forward. They're looking at what they think could have been and said, you know what, we could have been better. And going forward, we don't want this sort of this hurdle, this relationship hurdle, to keep us from being better. So I agree with you. And if it backfires on them, hey, they have nobody to blame but themselves, but they would rather do that and go with their instincts and go with what they know about Mark and his players then just do the safe thing and keep him around. And I also will say this: you mentioned the next guy that they bring in. I don't think it should be Steve Kerr. I don't think there should be the next guy, another guy coming essentially right out of the booth and onto the coaching sidelines, because while he's a guy that, or at least in terms of reputation, has a great understanding of basketball, really knows how to communicate it, there are so many elements to being head coach that he still doesn't even know about necessarily until he's in that seat. So I think they need to go the established coach route, the Stan Van Gundy route, maybe even a guy you like, Nate McMillan, who can be a gap bridger when it comes to player coach versus, sort of a more taskmaster type and a more disciplined guy. So we'll see what happens there. But, I get both sides of the argument. I get why you have a problem with it, but I also don't have a problem with it myself. And, I'd be much more intrigued by who they follow up Mark with than finding out why they fired him, because frankly, I already know enough. Like, I watched enough Warriors games, and I already, read enough and heard enough about their relationship to say I'm fine with the idea of getting rid of him. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the NBA Lockdown Podcast. For Bruce Bowen, I'm Israel Gutierrez. Hope we made your Wednesday better with a healthy dose of NBA Lockdown. We will talk to you again tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.
For his birthday, I want to send my godson to a playoff game. With the 4-star rated Western Union app, I can send him money conveniently from anywhere and make sure it gets there by tip-off. WesternUnion.com is making things so simple nowadays, and right now, they've got a special promotion going on. Download the free Western Union mobile app, and if you're a new customer, you can send money for 0 fee by using the promo code 2014-2014.
One discount per transfer, no cash value, void where prohibited. This offer expires May 18th. Western Union also makes money from currency exchange.